Trust in politics is broken, so can we get UK politics working again?
That was the last time we were happy. 2012.
I'm Beth Rigby, Sky's political editor. Join me every week with Labour's Jess Phillips and Conservative peer Ruth Davidson for some electoral dysfunction.
This idea of nuance has completely left politics.
Yeah. Together, we'll focus on the policies that could deliver political satisfaction. Follow electoral dysfunction wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm Neil Paterson. Welcome to the Sky News Daily. Busy day today. Later, we will be heading to Manchester, where the new all-singing and dancing 23,000 capacity concert venue CoOp Live has once again failed to open, resulting in absolutely no singing nor dancing.
My Olivia Rodrigo concert is now cancelled, which I'm actually really gutted about. So that's my weekend ruined. So thanks a lot, CoOp Live Arena. Thanks a lot.
But we start with the protests at university campuses across America, specifically that taking place at University of California, Los Angeles, where significant violence has occurred for a second night in a row. For a fuller understanding of why these protests are taking place, you can listen to yesterday's podcast. Martha Kelner is our US correspondent. She joins us from the UCLA campus. Martha, some distressing scenes emerging from where you are overnight. A dispersal order has been issued, but pretty clearly those protesters paying little attention to it.
Certainly what I saw when I managed to gain access to that pro-Palestinian student encampment was that there was at least 200, possibly 300 students and other people as well, because this wasn't purely a student protest, who had chosen to remain within that encampment, so had chosen to disregard that order from police to disperse. Police then reissued that dispersal order about an hour before they eventually went in. They said that anyone remaining would not only face arrest, they would risk serious injury. And certainly I have seen examples of serious injury just leaving the main encampment area in the last couple of minutes or so. I saw a gentleman being taken away by medics on a stretcher. One of his friends told me that he'd been hit in the chest by a rubber bullet fired by the police, but he certainly was in not a good way.
I mean, Martha, talk to me just a little more about the tactics that the police have used there. Just when you were speaking just a moment ago, I noticed over your left shoulder what looked and sounded very much like a flashbang, a stun grenade. I've seen images of that happening elsewhere. Pepper spray or bear spray has been used, riot gear. I mean, the police came and they were very, very serious about their intent, weren't they?
Yeah, make no mistake, this was an organised and forceful police response. It's no exaggeration to say that there were over 100 flash bangs dispensed by the police. I was stood with the pro-Palestinian protesters as those flashbangs flew overhead. And at first, it was the first time I'd heard them. They are incredibly disorienting. They are much louder than a firework. And that's what they're designed to do. They are designed to deter and distract these protesters. But for the most part, they remained resolute, facing off with these California Highway Patrol officers, who are otherwise known as California State Troopers. There was a significant number of protesters still there till the bitter end. Again,
as we've been talking, another couple of flashbangs going off behind you, signalling pretty clearly, Martha, that this is an ongoing operation. Why did these protesters not simply refuse to leave where they were, but barricade themselves in fact?
I think there's a lot of animosity between the protesters and the police. We saw yesterday evening the police failed to intervene for 2.5, 3 hours as these pro-Palestinian protesters were attacked by outside factions, by counter-protesters. And I think that's informed a lot of the reaction from protesters towards the police. Today, I saw it, people on the front lines, many of them wearing goggles, helmets, makeshift shields, and they were constantly calling for reinforcements. They were calling for wooden pallets to be brought to the front of the line so that they could repel the police officers even further. And it was working for a while. It took police officers some time to work out just what the best way to broach that encampment was. And you can hear still those flashbangs going off. This is still ongoing hours after the encampment was first breached. Police still struggling to defuse this situation, still struggling to dismantle this encampment and get rid of these protesters.
Martha, you have on one side the police, who it would appear have come mob-handed with pepper spray, in riot gear, clearly a big pile of stun grenades as well. They have taken these protesters into custody, detained them by tying them up with zip ties. On the other side of the barricade, literally, you have the students calling for reinforcements, calling for helmets, shields, trying to force the police back. What is your best guess as to how this is all going to end?
I think it's uncomfortable to see these scenes on US university campuses. It's not only uncomfortable, it's scarcely believable to see this happening in 2024. My best guess as to what happens next is that these protests will spring up at another campus around America. We've already seen this pro-Palestinian student protest movement spread from the East Coast, from Columbia University in New York, where it began, to more than a dozen campuses now. It's perhaps in California where these protests have become their most violent, but I think we will see this protest movement just galvanised by what they've seen here today, and questions probably about the size and strength of the police response too, and whether it was necessary.
Martha, and indeed, of course, your team there at the UCLA campus, thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.
As mentioned, for a fuller explanation of why these protests are ongoing, do check out yesterday's edition of The Daily. But before you do, take a breath. After the break, we will be in Manchester discussing CoOp Live, the city's new concert venue, which seems unable to get its doors open. Back soon. Manchester is a city with a proud musical tradition, the birthplace of such giants and geniuses as the Smiths, Oasis, Joy Division, the Stone Roses, Take That, and many more. Live music has traditionally thrived in Manchester too, and while some smaller venues have been struggling there, few were surprised when the city was announced as the home for CoOp Live, a new 23,000-seater venue that would be the UK's largest indoor arena when finished. Which is the problem? It's not. Last night, crowds were gathering to watch the American rapper and vocalist Boogie with da Hoodie. Yeah, me neither. When it was announced, the gig was cancelled because of a venue-related technical issue. This weekend's concerts by US superstar Olivia Rodrigo have also been postponed. And Peter Kay, the man meant to open CoOp Live, has had his dates pushed back a month. Our chief North of England correspondent is Greg Milam, and he joins us from outside CoOp Live. Greg, how's it looking? Finished at all?
No, well, to the layman, no. I've got to say there are crews of upward of 100 workmen. There's a whole builder's yard here. I'm watching a JCB moving right now. There are trucks with electrical gear, plumbing gear, and there's a lot of activity, stuff going in and out. It looks like a building site. It feels like a building site. It's a very slick-looking building. It's a black box, for those who haven't seen it, right next to the Manchester City football stadium, the Etihad Stadium. It looks very impressive, but down at ground level there is a lot still going on. It would appear to make it ready.
And yet, hours before the venue was supposed to be opening for an artist I am reliably informed is called Boogie with da Hoodie. No easy way for a white, middle-aged, middle-class man to say that one out loud. So the doors were open, people were gathering, but they had to bring everything to a halt. What exactly happened? Do we know?
Well, it seems that there was an issue with some of the ducting that deals with the heating and the ventilation and the air conditioning, and one part of that detached is the phrase they used. And they clearly felt that having happened during the sound check going on for the artist who you perfectly named there, they felt they couldn't carry on with that performance because they had to check the others because they couldn't be sure that the similar problem didn't exist elsewhere. There have been other issues with the electrical system, for example, that have caused the delays that have already happened. And that's the point here. This isn't the first embarrassing delay to this opening. There have been a number And the fact that we're dealing with international stars now, and Olivia Rodrigo, who was supposed to perform here later in the week, that they've had to cancel those performances, that suddenly is bringing international attention to these delays that perhaps last week seemed much more of a local story. It was a new venue in Manchester. It was about Peter Kay being delayed, a test show with Rick Astley having some problems. But suddenly we're talking about some of the big stars who are coming here, international stars. And I think that has drawn much more attention now.
And for obvious reasons. I mean, the artists, including Olivia Rodrigo, cannot be happy, but it's the fans. The fans must be absolutely livid.
Yeah, and all day we've heard stories of people who, as we know you have to these days, sat with multiple browsers open when the tickets went on sale, particularly for Olivia Rodrigo, and the joy at securing one of those tickets for some of the young fans in particular was immense. And yesterday they were reassured, first of all, that those shows will go ahead as normal. And then in the evening, parents having to break that news to children, for example, that the concert had been postponed. But also what goes along with that these days, which is train fares, potentially, hotels, potentially, the cost of all of that, the effort to get to a show on the other side of the country. And we've heard those stories of fans really distraught, genuinely distraught, because this is something they've looked forward to for a very long time, and it's been taken away with no guarantee that they'll be able to make any rescheduled date for Olivia Rodrigo or anyone else. We're talking about a venue that will hold 23,000 people. So by definition, there are a lot of people affected when these shows don't go ahead or can't go ahead as scheduled.
Do we know when the venue is planning to be able to hold 23,000 people, or even 3,000, 1,000? Do we have any indication from those running the place when it's likely to reopen?
I think that's the issue they have, and I don't think they've been able to be certain about anything at the moment. As it stands, Keane are due to play here on Sunday night. Next week there's a 5-night residency by Take That, which in Manchester, as you can imagine, is quite a big deal. But the venue has said that last night they took the right decision because of safety reasons to not go ahead, and they will not allow any events to go ahead until it is absolutely safe to do so. And they haven't ruled out that there could be further postponements.
And Greg, what, if anything, have we heard from the CoOp themselves? Like, I understand this will be a sponsorship deal. They pay some money, they get their name on the site, but it is their name on the side of the building.
Yeah, and they have said they want answers, along with everyone else, about what is going on, when this venue will be able to operate properly and safely. They do point out, as you say, it's a sponsorship operation. They are at arm's length from the actual operation of the venue. But if you enter into a sponsorship relationship on a venue like this, I guess you take the good with the bad. It is a huge feature on the landscape here, with CoOp's name on the Manchester skyline.
What do we know, Greg, about those who are behind the venue? Obviously, a lot of the blame has been thrown in the direction of the former general manager, Gary Roden, now departed from the venue. But now that he is gone, I suppose the focus turns to, well, where's the money coming from, and how annoyed are they that their venue hasn't been able to open up?
Yeah, it's a joint venture. As I mentioned, the venue is right next to Manchester City's football stadium. It is one of those in that joint venture is the City Football Group, which of course is Sheikh Mansour, a member of the royal family of the United Arab Emirates. There's a company called Oakview Music Group, which is largely the doing of Irving Azoff, a music mogul of much repute from around the world, connections to big bands like the Eagles, who will play their only, if it's open, will play their only UK dates on their farewell here at this venue. There are other backers as well. Harry Styles has been a very visible backer of the operation. But you're right, Gary Roden, who was the general manager of the project, stood down when these delays began to attract quite a lot of attention. He also had been pretty disparaging about smaller venues, which ran headlong into this campaign among grassroots music venues for big venues like this to do their bit to support venues that are closing in such large numbers. There was a big backlash against him, saying that some of those smaller venues were poorly run and that was their problem. Now, the CoOp Live organisations say they don't share those sentiments. They are committed to grassroots venues. But the Gary Roden situation, what he said, how he said it, and then having to step down, certainly didn't help in the PR aspect of what's gone on at CoOp Live, and this tension that's been created around what venues like this mean for the music business.
Thanks, Greg. And it's a point worth exploring. While super venue CoOp Live struggles to open its doors, smaller venues up and down the country are struggling to keep theirs open. Soaring bills, rent hikes, and the ever-present threat of gentrification and redevelopment made 2023 the most challenging year, according to the Music Venues Trust. And without these smaller venues, where on earth are the bands of the future going to emerge from? Pauline Forster owns the pub and music venue, the George Tavern in London's East End, and she joins us on The Daily. Pauline, look, as we were mentioning just before we started recording, I am a southwest Londoner, and therefore going as far east as Stepney Green does occasionally give me a nosebleed. So I have not been able to attend any events at the George Tavern. So tell me a little bit about it.
Well, I bought the George Tavern 21 years ago at a closed-down pub. I had no experience with a pub. In fact, I didn't even know I was going to open the pub. I bought it as a building to live in as an artist, to collaborate with other artists and musicians. I ended up opening the bar because it was all beautiful and there, and it was purpose-built for that hundreds of years ago. So I opened it, and that was 21 years ago, and we've brought live music to London on 7 days a week. I think our calendar's now full till June.
But it would be fair to say, though, wouldn't it, Pauline, that it's certainly not all been plain sailing, that there have been problems?
Financially, it's really difficult because we're a destination pub. So people come to the George from all over London, and including yourself one day.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. We rely on the musicians and the artists to bring the people to the George, but putting on gigs and providing that platform is expensive. We've got loads of overheads that all have to come out of that pint that you pull. I mean, what with soaring electricity prices, which has really crippled us in the last year, going up to £40,000 for the year. And then we've got security on the door that we have to have. We have to have equipment, sound engineers, wear and tear, the licence fees, VAT is crippling as well. So we provide so much, and we really struggle, and we could do with a hand, basically.
I mean, places like the George are dwindling in number because small venues are being converted into residential properties. There are noise complaints by the dozen, I'm sure. I mean, tell us about the problems you've had in that regard.
Well, I've had problems with having to fight for the last 18 years developers who want to build right on my backside. I mean, we were lucky when the first planning application came through, and I was not used to fighting planning applications. I just recently met Amy Winehouse. I went round to see her, and she said, get a T-shirt made. So I did. We had our Save the George T-shirt was launched, and then Kate Moss turns up. She puts the T-shirt on, and so we got into the press, and it snowballed from there. So I'm a bit of a champion fighting planning applications.
Bit of a champion name dropper as well, I've got to say, Pauline. Just Amy Winehouse and Kate Moss just thrown in.
Nick Cave, Grace Jones. Duran even did a weekend jamming once a long time ago.
Even with all this support, though, Pauline.
Still fighting.
Yeah.
We are a platform that's fairly easy for young, up-and-coming musicians and artists to start on their first stage, the George. Last dinner party, I was just going to say, did their first gig at the George a few years ago, and now they've just made it big time. So it's really important, that first stage that we provide for the arenas, because like 90% of the lineup from Glastonbury start off in grassroots music venues. So without us, you know, we are the beginning, and we should be rewarded and helped, because it's hard, and we could have it made much more easy, less struggle financially.
So where should the help then come from? Because as you say, there is this disconnect. At the moment, we're seeing venues like CoOp Live in Manchester being built, £365 million. And then we're seeing at the other end of the gigging spectrum, smaller venues going out of business at a rate of knots.
One a week on average in the UK.
So do you think that those bigger venues should be financially supportive of the broader industry, places like yourselves?
They do that in France. There's a levy on the ticket sales for the big venues and arenas, going back into the grassroots venues. That would be the most sensible thing. I mean, they do so well. I mean, they pack in, and people pay a lot of money for those tickets.
Yeah, they do.
It would be a really good way of being appreciated and payback for what we give to them.
Well, look, we wish you, the George, all your regulars, all the very best. Pauline Forster, thank you so much for being with us.
Yeah, and thank you, and get down to the George.
I'll be seeing you there very soon. Don't worry about it. Get me a pint in. I will freely admit the last time I was at a gig was so long ago that those attending were holding lighters aloft rather than their mobile phones. But despite my lack of patronage, the UK music industry remains a huge contributor to the British economy. So why is the grassroots music scene so overlooked when compared to other parts of Britain's cultural landscape? After all, when CoOp Live does finally open its doors, it'll be acts that started at the George they'll be looking to book. That's your lot for this edition of The Daily. We'll see you again soon.